Hello and welcome back to Harrison's Happy Hour. Jacob, my man, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
That's not too bad. I'm coming off a caffeine crash right now. I had a bang probably about 6 hours ago, and the effects are still lasting.
Yeah, caffeine's pretty potent. I made a bad mistake. Was it last week? Yeah, last week. It was like late at night, and I didn't want to go to bed, so I decided, hey, I'm gonna make myself a cup of coffee. Well, we got a French press, so you just kind of put in your coffee grounds and you're off to the races. I thought I knew the correct amount of coffee grounds to use, but it was quite apparent I didn't. I used about twice as much as I should have, and let me tell you, that was a big mistake.
Yeah,
it was terrible. I felt like I was gonna die.
What?
I swear to God, it was worse than it's that coffee caffeine is different. I swear to God, it felt worse than like an energy drink. I couldn't sit still. I was like fucking shaking on my seat like a crackhead.
I love to hear that. What even is a French press exactly? I've seen that there's like 100 different ways to brew coffee, and a lot of people say that a French press is like the best way to do it. Yeah,
so I'm not an expert or anything, but we have one and I use it. So basically you boil your water for your coffee. You get your coffee grounds, you put it at the bottom. Then you pour your boiling water in and you let it steep. You just kind of let it sit there for, I usually do about 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got this like plunger and you slowly push it down and it takes all the coffee grounds and puts them at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it's separate from the rest and you just kind of pour it.
Okay.
It's actually super simple to use.
Yeah, I mean, when I see people use it, I just think, I use Folgers coffee. I just throw it, in a regular like coffee pot type of deal, or it just brews the hot water through like the filter. I just stick with that.
Well, we don't have much counter space at my house, so we don't have a coffee maker, so we just use a French press.
Oh, fair enough. Funny enough, since we're on kitchen stuff, I was talking to one of my mom's friends, and we got on the topic of kitchens, and I was telling her about the time I failed to like boil an egg, and she tells me, she goes, so you know how to operate the financial markets, but you can't boil an egg. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in investing in things like that by any means, but I find that much easier than actually boiling an egg. You have anything?
Yeah.
You have anything kind of like that where it's like it's simple enough to do, but you don't know how to do it?
I burned a bagel once. That's like not. I like how do you burn a bagel?
How do you burn a bagel? Did you put it in the toaster?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough.
So what happened was I wanted a little crispier, and stupid me didn't turn down the timer.
Ah, okay.
So I'd originally put it in for like 4 minutes. I wanted it just a little crispier. And I was like, oh, I'll watch it and make sure it doesn't burn. And then I didn't. And it burnt and set off all the fire alarms in the house. And yeah, it was...
That's great. Speaking of like not turning like the timer down, I got an air fryer for Christmas. And I wanted to make some fries along with the shrimp that I made in it. And, an air fryer is actually very, like, quick. It cooks shit quick. And I put fries in there, and I selected the automatic setting for fries, but it had, like, 15 minutes. But by the time, like, 7 minutes came up, because, you're supposed to cook it for, like, half the time, then shake it in there, then put it back. At 7 minutes, there were some that were, like, burnt. I was like, what the hell? I was like, why is the preset 15 minutes, if it's going to be cooked all the way in 7?
Yeah, it's pretty dumb. It's kind of like the popcorn button.
Oh, yeah. Where you get, like, sometimes you, like, get a popcorn automatic setting where, like, half the bag is kernels. That's always the most annoying.
Yeah, then the other time it's like the whole damn bag is burnt.
But I'll tell you what, Jacob, you need to get yourself an air fryer. That is all
I'm thinking about it. My parents have a massive air fryer, and it's nice. I will admit, it's nice. It's better than frying it.
Oh, yeah.
It's easier than baking it.
It's healthier, apparently.
It's just in a convection oven. As far as I can tell, and from what I've heard, it's literally just a convection oven.
Oh, pretty much. It's pretty much an oven, but it just does it faster somehow. I'm not really sure.
It's like your regular ovens are, it's got the heating coils and stuff. And from what I gather, if I remember right, convection ovens work with it circulates the air around it with like a small fan, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I think that mostly everything should be air fried over oil. Like oil frying, like frying things in oil is okay, but the biggest issue is
I
that
do have some exceptions for that, and that's because of the way an air fryer works. I have gotten some soggy bits on the bottom before, and that's not pleasant.
I haven't reached there yet.
We had some like chicken breasts or something, and it wasn't quite right.
Okay.
It was good. It was freaking delicious, but the bottom was a little. You know how like if you put something in the microwave and it gets kind of soggy on the bottom? That's kind of what it was like.
Yeah. My thing is with the air fryer is that it allegedly over oil frying, it like cuts calories by like 70%. And then roughly 80.
Think about it. You're not cooking it in oil.
Exactly.
And the oils causes a lot of calories.
And I mean there's a lot less fat too. I mean the biggest thing really is that it makes you feel healthier. I mean,
it's lighter. I feel like if you fry something in oil, it's got a heavier, like you would describe eggs as being a light food and steak as being heavy. Oil fried food feels heavy and air fried food feels light.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I put pizza rolls in there, and that was actually really good. Because it doesn't feel as like slick.
Do they still bust open, like if you leave them in too long? Or does it do that less?
No, it does it less because it actually like crisps the outside slightly. I know, it was actually really good. I was really surprised. I mean,
Just like a tiny hint of crunch.
Oh yeah, I mean, I even put vegetables in there. I mean, you can literally put anything in there. I think the air fryer is going to be the big move here soon. I think restaurants would use air fryers over oil fryers.
They don't really have a need to. They have. I feel like a convection oven works similar enough if it's not already literally the same thing. I'd have to look into it sure, but I think they would just use a convection oven over air fryer, honestly.
I mean, I think the air fryer is meant to replace an oil fryer because it does do the same thing that an oil fryer does, but obviously there's no oil, so it's not entirely like slick and greasy and all this stuff. Because with the oil fryer, you got to get new grease and you got to replace it every now and then it's like popping out and stuff. I mean, shit, like if a local restaurant used air fryers to fry their fries over an oil fryer, I think I'd take the air fryer.
That's fair enough.
And it makes you feel like you're making a healthier choice.
However, the fries tend to be a little drier, and I will admit, maybe fries, depending on how they're cooked, if you drain them long enough, I feel like certain fries should still maybe be used in oil because they do tend to get a little dry in the air fryer, in my experience.
I'm not an expert of air frying. I need more experience.
We need an air frying culinary expert.
I'm but a novice in frying with air. All right, that's enough kitchen talk. Jacob, one big thing I saw kind of recently, towards the end of last week, actually, was some recent U.S. security breaches. And your major, if I'm correct, is cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to put this down to layman's terms for me and people listening.
Yeah, a lot of these articles are pretty good in explaining it, but I've kind of looked over it so here's the thing, and I have to say, and it sounds bad, I'm not surprised. And I'll get to why that is here in a bit, but so the big issues they've had were it was all software that was exploited. And there was three specific things that were involved. So it was Microsoft, SolarWinds, and VMware. I think we all know who Microsoft is. Makes Windows.
Yeah. What's SolarWinds? Is that what you said?
So I looked into SolarWinds just a bit, and it seems that their software is used a lot in government and similar industries. And besides that, I'm not really sure. I just know their software is Oh, well, here we go. Here's some info. It's an American company that develops software for businesses to help manage their network systems and information technology infrastructure. It's headquartered in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Just another software company. And then the last one is VMware. For those that don't know, VMware does a lot of like cloud computing. I know them for virtualization. They do VMware offers, I think it's just called VMware, but it's a virtualization environment to run virtual machines, which is just like basically a computer and a software program. It's a really dumb way of saying it, but it's the easiest way of explaining. And there's some exploits, some issues that these softwares had that led a hacker group to be able to breach it.
And this was a Russian hacking group, right?
Yeah, Cozy Bear.
Have you heard?
That's who. I don't know if it's. So from what I've read, I'm not sure if they know it's Cozy Bear or if Cozy Bear just claimed it. But okay, it says was identified, but I'd have to look and see if that means that they were told or if they know for sure it was them.
I think that's actually kind of an interesting thing that the U.S. government is using private corporations for their software/technology. Because you almost think like that'd be something that the government would have a department for. You know, you think it would be there like Secretary of Defense. Yeah, you think he'd be in charge of.
But the thing you have to remember is software development is very costly, which is why was going to bring me to my point of why I'm not surprised this happened, and that's because every single piece of software that they used was proprietary.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly?
So it's the source code to this stuff is not publicly available, and some people will be like, oh, well, that's bad. You don't want stuff like that in security, but it's actually not entirely true. People tend to shy away from open source because they think it's not secure, but that's not exactly the case. You can make something that is open source and completely secure. It doesn't even necessarily have to be free. There's open source stuff that isn't free software, but the reason open source, I'm not going to say is always more secure because it has issues like anything else, but it can be more secure because you have more people looking at it, noticing these flaws. Microsoft, for instance, it's their own thing. They don't let anyone else touch it. It's all garbled up code that they know how it works and what it does and how to make it run properly. That means there's only a select few people who get to look over it and see what the flaws may be. There's only a small number of people, and I say small, but it could be several hundred, but compared to what you would get with open source, there are less people looking at it to see what issues may arise with that software. Whereas with open source, you have the ability to have more people look in there and be like, hey, this line of code could cause issues, or this API isn't very secure. You've got some issues here and here that could lead to a backdoor or an exploit that could lead to a dangerous a cyber attack.
Okay. And wasn't the cyber attack for some of our nuclear defenses, right?
I think I read something about that.
I think that's what their main goal was.
There was... it was theft of data. Oh, and the worst part about this is it wasn't just the government that was affected. It was because they were able to exploit. They literally exploited Microsoft like themselves and SolarWinds and VMware. So it wasn't like they... It's not just that they used a backdoor in these people's software. To my knowledge, from what I'm reading, they themselves were also attacked. Microsoft, SolarWinds, and VMware were also directly attacked.
It says here that the suspected Russian hackers used Microsoft vendors, like resellers, to help get the breach.
Yeah, I'm reading some stuff about supply chain attack on SolarWinds, Orion software, which is what was originally like what kind of got me on this was this company I haven't heard of, but the government is clearly using a lot of their software, and because everyone is using it, well, one little tiny flaw opens up everything.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. There is just how much information Microsoft and a lot of these software companies have, because everything that we download, upload, view, and things like that, all this data is stored publicly for these software companies and things like that, to where they sell our data off to people. What's stopping someone from buying essentially all of our data, or stealing, hacking our data through this open source or proprietary source software?
Why I'm not particularly fond of Microsoft. People who know me well know I use Windows for like gaming and when I have to, but my operating source, God dang, I can't speak. My operating system of choice is actually anything that's Linux based. I find it much easier to use. Some people scoff at it, but when it comes down to it, it's not really even any more complicated to learn than Windows. Windows itself isn't easy, and I don't want to have to fight with my computer to get done what I want. I don't want it telling me what to do. I want to tell it what to do, and it better do it when I want it to.
Mm-hmm. Funny enough, though, the other thing is that I trust a private corporation with a lot of my personal information more than I do the U.S. government.
I don't trust either. That's the thing. I don't trust private corporations, and I don't trust the U.S. government. That's all there is to it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, if I had to pick between the two, I'd have to go.
To pick between the two, I'd rather go with a private corporation. But the issue is, there's nothing stopping the U.S. government in most cases from saying, "Hey, give us that data."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are they going to do if they send in a SWAT team or a specialized team to extract the data? Mm-hmm. Nothing.
It's like how when Edward Snowden released all that information about how the NSA was spying on American citizens, essentially. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I mean, it's not like they don't have all of our personal information. I mean, we have essentially tracking devices in our pockets that we willingly carry around with us everywhere.
Yeah, there was a funny goof. Linux YouTuber by the name of Gardner Bryant made a funny joke about that a couple of weeks ago. He said, "Yeah, I'm tired of carrying around this spy brick in my pocket all the time," referring to his phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everything, pretty much everything is on there. You could almost say that our entire society almost surrounds our phones or having access to technology. I'm sure there's maybe at least one person in America who has not touched a computer his entire life. And I envy that man.
Yeah, lucky person. The issue with companies like Google is they don't make their money the way a lot of people think they make their money. They don't make their money from ads on Google, from selling ads on Google Chrome. They don't make their money necessarily from their cloud computing. Yeah, they do a little bit, but most of their money, actually, Google specifically, comes from selling your data.
Yeah.
The problem with quote unquote, I'm not going to say free software because that's a different thing, but like, let's say free apps on your phone. Something it's obviously it's not open source. It's not like a private nonprofit entity that's doing this. It is someone who wants money. That's why they're making these apps, because they want money. The problem with a lot of these free apps, especially Instagram, Facebook, stuff like that, it's free because the product that they're selling is you, technically, your data, information about you. It's a lot of times being sold to the highest bidder.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And actually, you can one interesting thing that I looked into was you can invest in companies that store data that companies collect, because it has to go somewhere. I mean, even though essentially the internet isn't a physical thing, it still needs a physical location. So you have all these places running servers and storing data, and funny enough, you can actually invest in companies that store data. All this, because there's billions and billions and billions of pieces of data, I think, being exchanged every second. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, well, it's kind of like YouTube. They get more information uploaded than can be viewed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's It's just mind-blowing, really. Like, when you try to put it in perspective, it's the old saying, think of the biggest thing you possibly can and realize that this is so much bigger than that.
So much bigger than that.
It's like the universe. The universe is infinite. Can the internet be infinite? I don't really know.
I mean, in a way,
in
yes.
theory.
In fact, there's a lot more to the internet than people realize. I'm not going to get into deep web and dark web, but the gist of it is there's things not indexed by your web browser, and this kind of goes into like the deep web. But that goes into stuff like your Google Drive and stuff like that. You never think about that. You're like, oh, there's all these websites on the internet, but inside these websites, there's other stuff. The web is a lot bigger than that. Like, think about how big just Google stuff is, because you've got this person's drive and that person's drive. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's like realizing that there's, other countries that essentially have their own internet, like slash side of the internet. We have the quote unquote English side of the internet.
Yeah, we've got like
in America.
.com. Well, yeah, and if you search in a different language, you're not going to find many English sites.
Yeah, you're pretty much in a whole
We
nother
mainly
world.
have .com, .net, .edu. I think there's some other countries that might be able to use some of those, but I'm not super sure about like domain names and stuff like that. But .com, .net, .edu I notice are usually all American. Canada's .ca. Germany, I believe, is .ge.
UK is.
I think
UK.
Germany's .de actually. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, but it's just crazy, because one time I clicked on like a Spanish speaking video on YouTube, and then all of that side of the recommended was just Spanish YouTube videos. And when I go to like my homepage of YouTube, I'm not getting suggested, videos in Spanish or German and things like that, because I don't really fluently speak those. I speak English, I'm American, I speak English predominantly, and that's the side that it keeps me on. And so if I was to start, looking stuff up in French, because I took, French this
If
past
you want to see
semester.
some crazy stuff, look some stuff up in Russian.
Yeah, and then you have China. Isn't it China has their own web browser for their citizens, right?
They have some different stuff. To my knowledge, they're not allowed to use anything that's affiliated with Google, officially.
Yeah, and I think it's illegal.
Definitely, their citizens totally don't use VPNs or anything. They for legal reasons, no.
Yeah, I think
definitely
they
do.
China has no laws on the books barring private individuals from using VPNs.
To my knowledge, I don't think there's anything against VPNs, and if there are, people don't care because they do that to watch. There's obviously people who live in China that watch YouTube. It's a thing. Mm-hmm. It's harder. That's why they have things like Bilibili.
Yeah. Actually, they say that many VPNs just don't work because of server blacklists and VPN detection
so
technology.
that is the issue with VPNs. They usually have a portion of IP addresses, and that range of IP addresses can just be banned outright. So the best way to get around that, actually, is to make your own VPN. So what you do is, if you had a friend in another country, because you can call people, if you make a friend in another country, call them and have them set up a VPN server in their house, and then you can VPN there, because they're not going to be blacklisting individual like random IPs from like the U.S. or something. They're going to be blacklisting these this range of IPs from VPN providers that they know about.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, for people listening, VPN is a virtual private network, and it essentially allows you to browse things through like this different servers. So if I had a VPN open on my computer and I set it to let's go Japan, for example, because you can have different like server locations depending on the provider. So if I set it to Japan and then I opened up Netflix, I'd be on Japanese Netflix. I wouldn't be on American Netflix. You can call it.
You can use it for a bunch of different reasons to get around region locked content. Some people use it for privacy. I've heard that might not even be a really good reason for it. Just I've heard some people say that privacy may not be all it's cracked up to be on VPNs.
Well, I guess you're still not viewing things if you were just to use a VPN and you select the server location like Dallas. You're in the Dallas region, and so you're essentially the internet, like when you're searching stuff up on there, you're essentially searching up things on that server and not your home IP address, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's a little more complicated, but in a gist, I've seen it used in the corporate space for people you can use it to tunnel into a separate network securely. It uses encryption, so people can't look at what you're doing. That's kind of the point. So I guess in that aspect, it is kind of secure. It is secure, yeah. But that can provide privacy from people like your internet provider or the government.
Yeah.
But people can use it to go, like, say, if they're working at home and they need to access something that's on their work network. Say, maybe you're a system admin and you need to look at some data on some of the servers. You could use a VPN to do that. People do use it for that reason sometimes.
Yeah, especially when a lot of people are stuck working from home. A lot of companies are paying for new routers / software to where all like their technology, all the data and stuff goes through this server that they've created. Because I know a couple people that have that at their like new quote unquote home office. They're like, oh, I'm linked up to like my company's Wi-Fi, the laptop.
Yeah, so that they would do that through a VPN. And the reason they do it that way, instead of doing it that way is more secure than just having the server, quote unquote, face the internet. So it's like locked in its own network. You're not just going to, to my knowledge, most of the time, the way they're setting these up is so that you can't just type in the IP address on Google because it's not connected. The ones that you would connect to a VPN, to my knowledge, aren't usually connected to the internet directly. They're kind of kept in their separate section of the network that can't be accessed outside. So what you do is you VPN into the network, and then you can talk to it.
Yeah. It's a whole deep dive, really, once you get into all that. But I want to deep dive into something else here today, and this past week I've been listening to a podcast called "Philosophize This" by Stephen West on Spotify, and man, is it good! Today I listened to it was an episode about Socrates actually, and talking a bit about his life and kind of how he conducted his research into philosophy, and a lot of his stuff was essentially just through asking people questions and talking to people, further questioning people about what they believe in. And I think he actually never wrote anything down. Like, I don't think he wrote anything down. I mean, obviously people who heard his teachings and such wrote it down afterwards, but he made a lot of enemies because one of his biggest things that he'd do was his Socratic method, which is where he would question and try and get a definition out of people, and then debunk that whether or not, and see what a lot of people have to say about things. So he'd ask politicians, what is justice? He would ask students, what is knowledge, and try and understand essentially your average man's concept of that. And I kind of wanted to talk about that because I thought that was super interesting. Jacob, what is justice to you? What is justice to you?
That's a rough one, actually.
As just an average man, let's say you had to sit in the jury. You're one of the, is it 12 jury members?
I believe so.
I
Yeah,
think so.
Yeah, 12.
Yeah. So you're one of the 12. What is justice to you?
In that case, justice to me is if they're guilty of the crime, they need to be convicted. That's, in that case, the justice is pretty upright. But to me, outside of that kind of sphere, it gets more complicated because sometimes ethically justice isn't very just. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I find that a lot in the war against drugs. There's so many different takes on that. A lot of people say that, if you're selling weed or crack, on the street corner, you deserve the 10, 20 years or whatever you get. But is that really justice? Are you really solving the problem? That's kind of my thing. I think justice to me is getting more or less fixing the issue of where it began, the source of the problem. So on the war against drugs, one of the biggest things there is people who consume drugs and an illicit substance is instantly considered a federal criminal. If it's an illicit drug like acid, marijuana in some states, even though that's finally being loosened.
I don't like that term, marijuana.
Fine.
Yeah, honestly,
fine.
I think we need to refer to it as cannabis.
Yeah, it sounds cooler. But back to what I was saying. So as soon as this person consumes this substance, they're a federal criminal. And how are you supposed to seek help from essentially your protectors, which is our government? They're essentially supposed to protect us, help us feel safe, and make all these mandates and things to better our society. How am I supposed to seek help from them when I'm considered a federal criminal? And so a lot of people don't go seek help. A lot of people feel unsafe going to some sort of therapist or doctor or things like that because they know they'll get in legal trouble. And I think what we could do there, as I said, fixing the source of the problem is letting them know that, it's not just for me to lock you away and say that it's fixed because it taught you nothing.
Right.
And I believe it's roughly 50% of people who consume drugs and become addicts are only retake the drug afterwards because they're afraid of withdrawals. And I don't think it's just for someone to consume a substance, feel afraid of seeking help in fear of federal trouble, and then becoming an addict, because the government/legal system that is supposed to help us become better people and make a better society want to punish you for a mistake that you made, because for a lot of people it's a mistake.
But, right, especially if it becomes like a life-altering habit.
Mm-hmm. But there's also the cases where, you have a man who, murders his wife and children. That's a whole nother deal because they're harming others in that instance.
I think the use of drugs themselves aren't necessarily an issue. However, what you may do under the influence is definitely an issue. Especially even if it's legal in your state. You should know that you aren't supposed to drive high.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a DUI. You're driving under the influence.
Yeah.
So if it's legal where you are, please do the world and yourself a favor and don't get in a car when you are on anything, illicit or legal. Don't.
I think the biggest thing there is not harming others, because I believe as soon as you become a detriment to someone else or you possibly harm someone else, then there's a problem. Because it's self-inflicted. A lot of things like taking drugs, that's self-inflicted. But as soon as like a man who would get drop shrooms or acid and trip, get in a car and slam into another one or run over someone on the side of the street, obviously that's a different case than just consuming it and staying in your house. From there, you've harmed someone else. It's like free speech, because there's a lot of issues with free speech, and the argument there is what is classified as free speech or hate speech, things like that. And I believe that everyone has the right to speak their mind as long as it's not used in a way that oppresses or harms others, if that makes sense. Because then at that point, that's not free speech anymore. That's attacking someone else. That's being harmful towards someone else.
Yeah. A fun fact about that needs to be addressed, I've noticed a lot of people don't realize if you're in a private business, stuff like that doesn't necessarily apply. Especially in terms of things like these mask mandates. There may be mask mandates by the places you're in, but a business itself has the right to deny you service. That is they can deny you service. You can't say, oh, that's not allowed, that goes against my rights. Well, technically you forfeit some of your rights when you walk into a private business. They have rules and regulations of their own that if you don't follow, they can withhold service.
Yeah, I think my analogy there with free speech more or less sticks to public property and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you open up a can of worms there once you start talking about private business. But I do believe that private businesses have the right to deny service. I mean, there's some places that require you to wear a mask, and there's others that don't. And
I like the analogy for that. People don't have a problem with no shirt, no shoes, no problem. It's the same idea. It's like if you were to walk in naked.
Mm-hmm. I think more or less, because you could make an argument saying that if you were to go to a restaurant where it's not requiring a mask for you to wear, you could technically be harming someone in the future. I think that gets into a whole discussion of back to public health, because health. Oh gosh, it gets really confusing there.
It's a big can of worms too. Like there's several aspects of this is kind of. It's become a political thing, like wear a mask and whatnot, and we don't want to get into this too much, but like with the masks, there's several different aspects of why you should wear a mask and or why you would have to or be refused service. 1, public health. 2, businesses have rights to deny service. That's it. Mm-hmm. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to sue you because you didn't let me shop in your store. No, you can just go do your business elsewhere.
Yeah. It goes back to the whole thing of, small businesses. Small businesses, a lot of them essentially lost their rights, the ability to defend themselves during the coronavirus. So there was I think it was like 75% of small businesses closed down or something absolutely ridiculous like that.
We had one in Maryville closed down. It was a restaurant. It was a sports bar.
Yep.
They had fantastic wings. I won't name the restaurant just in case anyone doesn't want that out there, but it was a restaurant in our town, and what was happening is it was supposed to be being sold off. It was just going to change hands. It was going to stay operating. The current owner wanted to go somewhere else, wanted to move, and didn't want to have to deal with going back and forth. Mm-hmm. And he had a buyer lined up and everything. And COVID hit, and the buyer backed out, and it's sitting there empty. No one really knows what's going on with it, but it appears that it's dead. It's never coming back.
Yeah. It's crazy to me. There's so many people who have lost their livelihoods this past year, but people were all for, shutting down the country, but they didn't realize that, your small businesses are closing and there's people who live off of this. And then once it reopens, they've lost all this money from the 3 months or however long your state might have been locked down. And now you're forcing them, your government is forcing them to put up these plastic screens in between tables. Restaurants had to do outdoor dining, and they're paying $50,000-$60,000 to set up a patio. And then now they're saying, oh, well, outdoor dining is dangerous. I mean, Joe Rogan actually had an episode here with a couple people who own restaurants in California, and it's crazy to me just to hear some of the things that they're talking about, because there's just no communication with public health officials and governors with small businesses. They oh gosh, what was it? They had to a lot of them had to close down, even though they were abiding by these mandates that the government was making, just because maybe the 10% of restaurants, like small businesses or restaurants who didn't do that, essentially, ruined it for the other 90%. It's like the one guy in class who is being obnoxious and gets the whole class in trouble. It was the 10% of people of restaurants who didn't abide by these new rules and things that ruined it for the other 90%.
I don't see why. Yeah, I take issue with that. I don't see why you couldn't have it be kind of like a health inspector kind of situation. They're not abiding by the rules, you get closed down. Well, I think in cases like that, it probably should have been on a restaurant by restaurant basis.
My biggest pet peeve though is that all these massive corporations stayed open. People were fine with McDonald's being open, but they weren't paying attention to the little guys.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they don't have indoor dining, or they usually don't allow dining indoors. But Yeah, you're right.
I mean,
They weren't forced to close down.
All the money that would go to your local mom and pop stores instead went to Walmart and Target and McDonald's and things like that were considered essential. Those were considered essential, but not your average American, man who saved money for 25 years to open up a small business that he believed in just to get shut down and lose all this money through, having to make rent payments, loss of revenue, and upkeep and just all this stuff. And people are shattered,
Well, that's the worst part about it. And I don't know if there's a way around this, if people could have stopped collecting rent. I don't know. Like, I'm sure people would have been willing to eat it. I don't know, but the world just runs on money. And so you've got people that still need to collect rent. They still need to collect utilities. People can't pay it when they don't have money.
Yeah, and people can't work. I mean, there's people who are living paycheck to paycheck, working as a waitress or waiter or busboy or chef at these restaurants, and now they're laid off or they're not getting paid for 6 months, and then the government, says, oh, here's $1,200, to hold you over for a month and a half. Good luck.
It's been longer now.
And there's people paying, astronomical rates of rent and things like that in like New York and California. I mean,
yeah,
rent there is absolutely insane. And they go ahead.
The thing is, like, it's just mind-boggling just how we're doing it. It's like, sure, people will say, oh, but we're starting to open up. There's a lot of places that are open. Places are open. Okay, cool. But at the same time, you have to realize some people did not get their job back. They were laid off and they won't come back.
Mm-hmm. There's restaurants that are never coming back, but your McDonald's stays open. It's like the whole thing how people say, oh, I hate private corporations, these massive megacorps, and yet these corporations go out and, say, oh, well, I support LGBTQ rights, or I support other quote-unquote progressive ideals, and then people are, they just turn a blind eye to them now because, oh, they're not like the people that they don't agree with, essentially.
Oh, they're not so evil. They hold our ideals. But do they? Do they really?
No.
Probably not. They were just ticking off a box so you weren't mad at them anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a great move. By all means, I'm socially progressive. By all means. But it's always more effective for a massive megacorp to go out publicly and say that they support things like Black Lives Matter and these other progressive movements, and then never actually do anything about it.
Well, and here's my thing. Chick-fil-A, they're not exactly the most progressive.
Oh, no.
People know this, and they still purchase their stuff. I think these corporations need to stop being fake. If you don't support something, you don't support it. That's it. Yeah. If you support it, that's fantastic. Show it, and don't just put empty words out there.
Absolutely. I would have liked to see more money going to lower income areas to help support them up from a lot of corporations who say that they're progressive. One thing that I actually saw recently was I watched a documentary called Making Warren Buffett, and if you don't know, Warren Buffett is one of the greatest investors of all time, and I believe his wealth currently is around $85.6 billion, and I believe he's the fourth richest man in the world last time I checked. And he is actually donating a majority of his wealth right to all these foundations that help support all these, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? He's giving all this money to
like charities?
Charity, yeah. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word there.
That's awesome, and I think it's great that he's doing that. But I think we as a society need to be careful in who we give money. I'm not saying that people don't deserve money. I definitely believe it. But I think we need to maybe give money directly to the people in need, because a lot of these charities aren't upfront about where the money goes.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Once you start doing a lot of deep dives into certain charities, you see that a lot of the money does not go to where it says it's going to go.
Even if you look at like a website that rates charities, The problem is, and as a certain YouTuber found out, Moist Critical, he goes by Penguin01 on YouTube. You can kind of look up. He's talked about this before. He used to give all his money to charity. I think he's found another way to give back to the community, but he stopped because he found out that a lot of the money that he was giving to these charities were not going to who they had said it was going to go to. His money was basically being thrown away because it wasn't going where he had intended it to. It wasn't going to the people he was trying to help.
Yeah, that's my thing. I do plan on making charitable donations when I am able to, when I'm financially, well off and like I have a stable income and things like that. I do want to start making donations, but I want to see it locally. I think a lot of people should focus more or less on local charities. There's a lot of people in my hometown who donate money to the school to do big projects to further improve it, and people love to see it. Being from a small town, getting a new track, eventually a new football field, people go out and watch the games. People support the community. People go to the local restaurants all the time. People just they come together in a lot of communities, and I think a lot of people need to put focus on communities instead of these massive charities that say they're going to give all their money, to, finding better farming resources in Africa and things like that. And then you discover it has to go through like 6 different people and, like a certain percentage is lost for profit and things like that. I think people should put a lot of focus on their communities because a lot of these communities right now are struggling, in New York, California, a lot of places that were hit extremely hard with lockdown measures. They've lost a lot of community businesses. They've lost a lot of people. And as a nation, we're hurting. And I think that instead of putting focus nationally, they should put it more or less into local efforts.
Yeah. I would much rather give to charity more directly in my own community, directly to somebody, or if I had a large amount of wealth, say someone needed something, instead of giving to a charity that would maybe help them, maybe buy that thing for them, or give opportunity to get it for them, versus just throwing your money somewhere where it may or may not get where it's supposed to go. Take initiative and help somebody in your community.
Mm-hmm. It's like giving someone a $20 bill to go buy a candy bar, and then you expect to get your money back. And they say, "Oh, well, it was worth this much."
The candy bar in the first place, or I hate to say it, but I don't like giving money to people on the side of the road. I would much rather give them what they say they want. So if they're hungry, I would rather get them a Big Mac than just hand them a $20 bill, because sometimes they may make a dumb decision with it. Instead of going to buy a Big Mac, maybe they're fighting out. I'm not saying everyone does this, but it's sometimes what'll happen is they might be fighting alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And so instead of going out to buy that Big Mac and feed themselves, they're just going to go buy a bottle of Jack Daniels.
Yeah. You see a lot of videos like that where people record like, I give this homeless person $100. Let's see what he gets with it. And then he goes and buys, the most expensive bottle of booze he can. I mean, there's a lot of people who aren't capable of managing things, or like this sense of greed kicks in, or old habits kick in. I mean, one of my goals for when I retire is to be active in my neighborhood. So whether it's, helping a hand, raking leaves, or helping fix a car, or just things along that line, painting a fence. It's about building that sense of community, as being, putting yourself to work in these areas. I think that's what I want to see. I want to see people working to help others. I want to see people putting effort instead of just making a pledge and writing, a paycheck to a charity that says it's going to help a community. Build, billionaires or millionaires. Wasn't Rockefeller back in the day? I think it was him or one of the other giants in the Industrial Revolution that put a lot of his money into his local communities, building libraries and things like that to help.
Yeah, I think that's more of a help than throwing your money toward a charity. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's some charities out there that do good work, but I'd personally rather not take the risk. I'd rather make sure I know where my money's going. I want to know that it helps somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like the adopt a family thing that you see during Christmas. There's a lot of people who adopt a family and buy gifts that like the mother asked for, the single mother who's financially having trouble and is seeking help, and you go out and buy the gifts that like, oh, she wrote down. Our church, we used to do those trees, where you go to like the local store. Yeah, you go to a local store and then you go buy like the gifts that like kids ask for. So there's kids who ask for jeans and shirts and tools, and you go out and buy those, and then those just go directly to them. So as I said, it's you yourself need to put action into something you believe in. You need to work for something you believe in. It's like when you get a career, you want to work in something that you love. You want to work to better yourself in something that you care about. So I think that should stick to as well in the idea of charities, is that you should work in something that you believe in.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's enough. We don't want to get too long here on this episode. Jacob, anything you want to say before we end this episode?
Holidays are almost over. I mean, hey, we're almost to the new year.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Let's hope.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, let's hope 2021 is better than 2020. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you listen to the next happy hour.